I'm George Westwell, the CEO of the Cheval Collection, London's leading luxury service department. And I'm here today with three of my key colleagues to let you know what we've been doing in Cheval since the lockdown and what we're planning to do as this lockdown starts to lift and people start to travel back to London. And we thought it might be interesting to share this with you from three different lenses. The first one will be operational, and we have with us our Chief Operating Officer, John Phillipson, who will be telling us what we've been doing and going to do operationally. We then got Doug Greenwood, our Director of Sales and Marketing. And from his perspective, it's very key that we have the right information and we message that correctly to our guests. And then finally, we've got Rafał Kowalski, who's our Director of Engineering, who's going to address a couple of concerns that I've heard on a number of forums to give the assurance, we hope, to our customers that the Cheval residences are a very safe haven to stay in. So if I can start with John. John, back at the end of March, the government decided to lock down most of the hospitality sector in London. Can you just share with us, what did Cheval do, why did they do it, and where are Cheval today?
I think our key focus was to try and make sure that we were protecting the guests and the staff. And whilst we were allowed to continue to operate, we had to manage the anxiety of our employees. So we decided to break ourselves up into teams of Team A, Team B. And basically what we're doing is they move in for a period of 7 days into the residence. We collect them by car. They work a full 7 days, 12-hour days. And when they finish their week, they then go home and rest for a week and another team will take over. And that reduces the amount of public transport they have to use. And in fairness as well, it's allowed us to create a sense of camaraderie during this difficult time. So it removes the anxiety that we thought we may experience.
Great. And during that period of time, have all the Cheval properties remained open?
We closed 2 of them, mainly because at the time they were mostly our short stay residences, which at the time of the lockdown was considered not to be ideal. And there were only a few guests left in them. So we moved those guests into our other residences that are more long stay and close them down, but obviously still leaving a skeleton crew, keeping them operational, answering the phones, and carrying out various cleaning tasks and maintenance tasks that were essential, as well as keeping the building secure.
And John, you would have read about this in the newspaper and seen the news. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety and concern about people getting back into traveling again. And, it's never going to be such a safe environment until such time as a vaccine is available. And I've heard and read recently on forums that, that is the concern, the main concern of 93% of people who usually travel is their safety and their well-being when they are traveling and staying in a place which is not their home. So what is it that Cheval are doing now and are going to be doing in the future to give the confidence to the traveling public that if they come to a Cheval residence, it is, as best it can be, a safe haven?
Absolutely, George. We started sort of looking at doing a risk assessment of the whole customer journey, starting from their point of arrival, whether it be a train station or an airport, and liaise with our car company to make sure that they were implementing COVID actions to protect the guests. And so obviously they could be met at any point in destination. The drivers will be wearing masks and gloves. There is hand sanitizer and surface wipes in the back of the car. They also advise the clients that they've taken their temperature on that day and are not having a fever. And then obviously they'll transport them to the residence. Once they get to the residence, we started to implement plans where we could take temperatures of the guests within the residences, as well as providing obviously hand sanitizer. And we've put on additional perspex screens onto our reception desks. And so it gives a feeling of safety and comfort right from the point of arrival. Within the lobby, there is a poster of, I guess, rules of engagement, both for customers and for staff, and what we are doing within the residence and what they can do to support us in keeping them safe as well. And that mainly is about, again, washing your hands, letting them know that we are cleaning touch points around the building every hour. Those are things like door handles, lift buttons, corridor touch points, stairwells, things like that. And again, just reinforcing that message that they are in safe hands. And then when they get into the apartments themselves, they'll see a sticker on the door that sort of says that the apartment has been cleaned using medical grade cleaners and sanitizers from top to bottom. And we've always had very high cleaning standards. So on a whole, nothing really has changed. We're just using a more powerful chemical that's approved to tackle high bacteria levels. And then within the apartments, we removed a lot of items considered not to be essential items, like books and paper collateral, pens, pencils, notepads, and things like that, whilst at the same time really beefing up our cleaning regimes on surfaces, especially sort of metals, plastics, or composites, to make sure that they feel comfortable that we have touched everything that they could possibly touch. And then within the welcome hamper that we provide to all our guests, we've added masks, gloves, surface wipes, and sanitizers for them to use throughout their stay. And then again, as part of the rooming process, if they choose not to have a rooming, we explain to them what we can do, and we sort of tailor it to their needs. If they want interaction, we will service the rooms, of course, on a weekly basis. And we ask them to sort of maintain social distance while we're doing that. Our staff will be wearing gloves and masks while they're going about their duties. And if clients don't want that part of the service, we can deliver the items that we would normally use to replenish or service a room, and they can do it themselves if they wish.
Okay, well, thanks, John. I mean, obviously a lot happening, and you've thought this through in some fine detail to convey to our guests that they will be in a safe haven. But let's play devil's advocate here. I mean, everybody in the hospitality sector is going to be putting out a similar message, that the safety of the guests and the sanitization and everything is there, and that the guest is paramount. And I get that, but to a fellow traveller coming to London, over and above that, what, if anything, would you say to them as to why they should stay at a Cheval residence?
Well, I think you used the right word. We're a residence. It's their home, and we have the ability to support them from a service point of view, but they have the ability to be self-contained. They have their own bedrooms, lounge, dining room, kitchens. We are well serviced by food suppliers, shopping deliveries, so they can go about their business with as little interaction or as much as they want. It's their home. Okay,
thanks, John. I'm going to switch over to Doug now, the Director of Sales and Marketing. So, Doug, you've got many areas of responsibility from a sales perspective, a global reach, and also from the digital perspective, a global reach. So, clearly at this time, you're unable to get out and about as much as you'd like to. How have you and your team been keeping in touch with the customers? What sort of messages have you been given them? And as we start to come out of this lockdown, what do you think is the message over and above what John has said that we should be passing on to our customers, and how would you be doing that?
A few questions.
A lot of questions. I know a lot of questions in one go, but there's a challenge for you.
Yeah, good. So how have the team been communicating is probably the key part. Communication certainly during this period of time has been really, really important. And the initial period, the early stages, it was extremely frenetic for the team from a both marketing and sales perspective. Initially, the sales guys were very engaged with the customers that we were working with. And quite often it was just purely people gathering information, getting to know what was actually happening just within their own environment, within their own families, and also messaging with regard to what was happening at Cheval. We then put more structure actually to that. So we have a very good PR company that we've been deploying on a weekly basis to make sure that we unify our message. And that message needs to come across really in terms of we are open. We have been open. We've been trading extremely effectively with the emphasis on that safety and security, and making sure that people know that we're flexible. We have been super flexible with regard to people's requirements. So that element of PR has been combined with a digital marketing piece, which we've obviously gone out to an extensive database that we're obviously working with. And at the same time, we've been combining that then with the in-house communication that we have with the customers that are still staying with us. and still obviously need to communicate potentially with the front desk. So the Cheval app has been a great tool that allows us actually to communicate with the guest without necessarily having to come down to the front of house area into the receptions. And there's a really good two-way sort of conversations that have been running with really attentive teams. And as you know, we manage our front of house on a 24-hour basis. We are super secure and super diligent with regard to delivering a very high customer expectation in terms of service. So yeah, initially that's the trail has been running to make sure that we have got that message out to the broader community in terms of where we get support from so many markets, whether it's the US, whether it's Australia, into Asia, into India. We have been updating our international sales offices as to what we're doing. They've obviously then been carrying that message across. And actually, we've had some fairly regular, almost weekly webinars where we've been updating the customer base again of the changes and activities that we've been implementing actually on property. So it's a sort of local, UK-wide and international message process that we've undertaken.
And so, Doug, so just tell me very succinctly now, you've got 3 catchphrases, I think, which is stay safe, flexible, and open for business. And you've got somewhere in there, I've seen this. Tell us about this self-isolation offer that's currently out in the market.
So I think it's going to. We're trying to read where is the demand going to come from. We had hoped that maybe leisure may support the UK in terms of hospitality going forward. That actually doesn't look like it's going to be, certainly with the self-isolation stroke potential of quarantine, that could be quite tough. So actually we've been looking at how, particularly from a commercial business perspective, people will still need to be coming into London and obviously availing of accommodation. So we're proposing Cheval are going to host the first 2 weeks potentially of self-isolation stroke quarantine within a Cheval residence. So that's going to come completely complimentary on the basis of a 90-day stay. So we would like to encourage, and that's actually being put out into the market through.
So let's just hit that again, because this is an important message. So you're saying if a guest stays for a minimum of 90 days in a Cheval residences in London, the first 14 days, which is potentially the self-isolating stroke quarantine period, is complimentary.
For free, yeah. It's a bold statement, and it's been extremely well received, certainly within the booking community. So I think customers realize then it's going to take away some of that element of cost and make it that much more cost effective for them to come through. And that's where I think that opportunity lies for us to maybe gain some more occupancy and keep our buildings busy.
Okay, thanks. And then Doug, my final question for you, it's the same one I asked John. What would you say to a fellow traveller thinking of come to London as to why they should stay at a Cheval residence?
I think John covered a lot of the really good comments on that, actually. For us, we see it really, the customers have got flexibility. So they can actually do that little bit of self-isolation if they need to. They've got their own lounge, they've got their own kitchen. It is a home away from home. So they do not have to worry about being somewhat more curtailed within a smaller, say, hotel bedroom. They've got so much more opportunity. And then with the ancillary services that we can offer, that's absolutely the most comfortable way of staying, I think, and relocating into London as far as that goes. The other component that we're also looking at is potentially customers who may be quite worried, even within the UK, of actually using public transport, and companies that may want to obviously facilitate or use service departments so that they can run teams like John was mentioning, maybe team A, team B, and rotating. So potentially those customers could actually take apartments for a longer let and rotate their teams within them. So they might do 1 week on, 1 week off, and not have to worry about taking more public transport and putting their own employees at risk.
Great, thank you. So let's now turn to Raphael, our Director of Engineering. Raphael, I've got to say, we're delighted to have you here because you're normally locked in the plant room or in an office, and it's not very often that we invite you to these front-facing type of little events, but delighted you're here. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you here is that I've heard from a number of sort of conference calls I've been on and things I've read that there's a lot of concern about the fact that air conditioning can be or is a spreader of the coronavirus. And as we have all of our apartments air conditioned to some extent, and in some cases completely, what can you say to our viewers that would give them an assurance that the air conditioning itself is not a carrier or a bearer of the coronavirus?
Sure, thank you, George. First of all, there is a common misconception about the air conditioning systems and ventilation systems. What we heard a lot is the ventilation system is actually the spreader of the virus, can be the spreader of the virus. Because if we imagine the apartment as a box, what the ventilation is the provision of the fresh air from outside to the box, and then extraction from that box to the atmosphere. So some of the systems, they share obviously multiple areas. So there are multiple areas provided with the fresh air, and the same with the extraction. So what we have in our system, in our buildings, is the ventilation system where the air is taken from the roof. So if you imagine what can be danger on the roof, absolutely nothing. So there is no risk that someone is going to sneeze into the grill, and obviously that the germs and the viruses, they're going to get into the apartment. So there is no risk. A part of that, we have a plan to sanitize every single ventilation system in our buildings. So if we look at the air conditioning, basically if you get this box, air conditioning system only recirculate the air which is already in that box. And in our buildings, we don't share the air conditioning system with other apartments. So you can look at every apartment as an individual box. So there is no risk that we're going to take air from apartment A and that air is going to go to apartment B. So from that perspective, it's absolutely safe. I know there is some rumors about the systems on the ships. We cannot compare the systems.
This is the cruise liners, yeah.
That's correct.
So what's the difference between their systems and our systems?
So if you imagine on a cruise ship, you don't really want to pump the very moist, very salty air into the cabins. So majority of those systems, they are recirculating the air, and this air is shared between the multiple cabins. So if someone is really sick in one cabin, this air can go to the another cabin. So that's the risk. But again, we know very little about this virus and the way it spreads. And there is no scientific evidence that actually that was the case on one of the cruise liners.
Okay, thanks. Now, earlier on, John mentioned that we've closed down 2 properties, which means that they're living dormant. And when I think of empty, closed down properties, I think of things like Legionella. Just tell us, how do we approach the closing down of a building, the maintenance during the closed down period, and then the preparation to reopen as and when that comes about?
Sure. Well, basically for us, for the maintenance time, that the moment when we're closing for the guests, it doesn't mean we're closing our maintenance operation, because maintenance operation has to still be live. So, for example, from the Legionella prevention, we flush every single outlet in the building, in every apartment. So it's a shower head, if that's the tap in the kitchen. This is flushed every week. At least for a minute, and everything is recorded. So from that perspective, there's always bacteria which can be in the water is flushed away. So there is no way for the bacteria to actually multiply and be dangerous for our guests. A part of that, we are preparing to reopen those 2 properties, and before those properties they will be reopened, all the filters in the air conditioning will be changed, cleaned, sanitized. So we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of work into the systems to be absolutely safe for our guests.
Excellent, good, thank you. And then finally, my question for you, Raphael, perhaps a bit unfair to ask you as our Director of Engineering, but what would you say to a fellow traveller coming to London as to why they should stay in the Cheval residences?
It's not only about the situation now with the virus. Health and safety is very, very important for Cheval Collection, and whatever we do now, it's nothing different what we did before. We always have to make sure that our guests staying with us, they have absolutely safe and healthy environment. We have planned preventive maintenance programs in place to ensure that all the stay of our guests will be absolutely hassle-free. For this time, for this particular challenge, we increased our maintenance regimes. So we are doubling and tripling our efforts to make sure everything is sanitized, everything is clean, and everything is bacteria-free. And we are ready to invite our guests to our apartments.
All right. Thanks, Raphael.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our first podcast, and I hope it's provided some useful information to you. I'd like to thank John, Doug, and Raphael for your contributions. Our final message is that we do remain open, and we will ensure that your stay with us is both enjoyable and safe. And our reservations are open 24/7, and our website remains open. So it just, on behalf of my colleagues, just remains for me to say, stay safe, and we hope to see you in London sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.